Rain hammered the roof as a soaked woman pushed open the biker bar door and stumbled inside. Conversations died instantly. Every man in leather turned to stare. She stood trembling, voice barely holding together. "Please, they took my kids." At the far end of the room, the leader rose from his chair, calm eyes cutting through the noise. "Who took them?" "Darren Cole," she said. "He said I'd never see them again." He set his drink down, stood and grabbed his keys. Outside, engines roared to life, thunder joining the sound. 6 bikers rode into the storm, chasing headlights and time itself to save 2 children before dawn. What they found that night would tear their town wide open. This is Hot Tales! Hit subscribe, because once this ride begins, you won't look away. Let's check in. 1 for first-time viewer, 2 if you've seen a few, 3 if you never miss. Rain slammed against the tin roof of the forge, hammering the steel like a warning. The smell of oil and wet dust filled the air, heavy enough to choke. Outside, thunder rolled across Ridgehaven's empty highway, and the sound of engines idling was the only heartbeat the storm hadn't drowned. Blake Mercer stood in the doorway, arms crossed, rain dripping off his leather jacket. He was watching the storm the way some men watched a fight they already knew was coming. Dean Voss was half under a Harley, cursing at a stripped bolt. "You think the sky's trying to drown us or what?" Blake smirked. "Sky doesn't have the guts." The joke died fast when tires screamed through the rain. Headlights cut across the yard like lightning, and a small silver sedan fishtailed to a stop, tires hissing on the wet gravel. The door flew open before the engine quit. A woman stumbled out barefoot, soaked to the bone, hair plastered to her face. She ran straight for the door, mud splattering up her legs, her voice splitting the storm. "Please, they took my kids." Everything stopped. Inside the clubhouse, the laughter, the music, the clatter of tools, all of it fell silent. Blake stepped forward, pushing open the heavy steel door. The woman collapsed against it, gripping the frame like she could hold herself upright by sheer will. Rain rolled off her in sheets. He caught her before she hit the floor. "Easy, breathe." She looked up, eyes wild. "They took my kids, Emma and Noah. They said if I don't find the money tonight, they'll—" She couldn't finish. Her voice cracked and vanished into the thunder. Blake guided her inside, his voice low and even. "Who took them?" "Darren Cole," she gasped. "He sent his men. I borrowed from him last year. 5,000 turned into 30. I missed 1 payment and now—" She covered her face, shaking. "He took my babies." Dean came up behind Blake, eyes narrowing. "Cole, that loan shark piece of—" "Not now," Blake snapped. He turned back to the woman. "What's your name?" "Clara," she whispered. "Clara Hensley." Blake nodded once, like he'd already made a decision. "You go to the cops?" She laughed bitterly. "They work for him. They won't even take my call." Ryder Nash emerged from the back room, tablet in hand. "Boss, you want me to run the traffic cams?" "Do it," Blake said without hesitation. Dean glanced between them. "We're actually doing this?" Blake gave him a look cold enough to quiet thunder. "She came here in the rain. You really want to tell her to leave?" Dean's grin returned, sharp and dangerous. "Hell no, just checking." Clara's breath came fast. "You'll help me?" Blake met her eyes. "You came to the right place." The next sound was engines roaring to life, low, heavy, synchronized like thunder finding rhythm. Dean tossed Clara a black helmet. "You ride with me. Don't argue. I've never—" "You will now." Outside, the rain came down harder, bouncing off the chrome and black steel of the Iron Vow's bikes. Blake slid his gloves on, every motion precise. "They're heading west," Ryder called from the doorway. County Cam picked up a black van with no plates. "Looks fresh." "Then we ride west," Blake said, swinging onto his Harley. Clara climbed onto the back of Dean's bike, her fingers gripping the sides like she was holding on to the last thing tethering her to the world. The engines roared together, and in a heartbeat they shot out into the storm, 6 shadows cutting through rain and wind, the highway blurred beneath them, water spraying from the tires like silver fire. The storm turned everything into flashes, lightning, chrome, breath. Clara's heart slammed in her chest with every rev, every roar, every second closer to her kids. Ryder's voice crackled over the radio through static and thunder. Vans 10 minutes ahead, heading toward the quarry road. Keep eyes on it, Blake said. We end this tonight. Dean leaned forward, shouting through the rain. You sure about this, boss? Blake's eyes didn't leave the road. Never been sure of anything. But we don't leave kids behind. Lightning split the sky, turning the world white for half a heartbeat. Clara saw the reflection of Blake's bike ahead, the silver skull painted on the tank, the words Iron Vow etched beneath it. She didn't know these men, didn't know if they were saints or sinners, but right then they were the only ones who moved when she screamed. The road narrowed, curving toward the quarry, tire tracks cut through the mud ahead. Fresh, deep, Ryder's voice again. Confirmed. Van stopped near the ridge. 3 heat signatures, 2 small, 1 adult. Blake's hand shot up, signaling. The convoy skidded to a halt, engines idling like beasts waiting for command. He turned in his seat, voice carrying even over the rain. No one fires unless I say. We get the kids, we get out. Dean's grin was all teeth. My kind of night. Blake dismounted, boots sinking into the mud. The rain turned his jacket black, lightning catching on the silver wings patched across his back. He looked at Clara. Stay here, you hear me? She shook her head. I can't just sit. He stepped closer, his voice soft but final. You want your kids back? Let me do what I do. For a moment she could only nod, her lips trembled. Please, bring them home. Blake's jaw tightened. That's the plan. The 6 bikers fanned out, melting into the storm, figures of leather and steel swallowed by rain. Clara stood alone beside the humming engines, rain soaking her hair, her breath catching in her throat. Somewhere beyond that ridge, her children were crying, and somewhere closer, the Iron Vow walked straight into hell to bring them back. Rain blurred the world into streaks of silver and shadow. The Iron Vow thundered down the highway, engines snarling against the storm, their headlights carved through the darkness, beams of defiance in a sky that refused to stop breaking. Clara held on to Dean Voss's jacket so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her breath fogged inside her helmet, every exhale a whisper of fear. The sound of the bikes was deafening, yet inside her chest she could hear one thing louder, the echo of her daughter's scream. Blake Mercer rode point, his eyes fixed ahead. Water streamed off his helmet visor, lightning flashing across the steel curve of his tank. Behind him, Ryder Nash's voice crackled through the radio, steady as always. Got eyes on the van. 2 miles up. They pulled off the highway. Blake's reply came low and controlled. Direction, Old Mill Road. Lead straight into the quarry. Dead zone for cameras. Dean spat a curse. He's not running, he's burying something. Blake twisted the throttle. Not today. They veered off the main road, tires skidding across slick asphalt. The storm thickened, wind pushing against them like a living thing. Mud splattered against their boots as they hit the dirt trail leading into the valley. The sound of engines echoed off the cliffs. 6 bikes chasing 1 van, thunder chasing thunder. Clara could barely see, but she didn't need to. The rhythm of their ride told her everything. They weren't searching anymore. They were closing in. Ryder's voice broke through again. They stopped. 1/4 mile ahead, near the ridge. Positions, Blake ordered. The convoy slowed, splitting into formation like soldiers on instinct. Ryder and Dean flanked left, cutting through the brush. Two younger bikers peeled right, circling to block the road. Blake motioned to Clara. "You stay here." She shook her head violently. "I can't." He looked back, eyes fierce under the rain. "You can. You want your kids alive? Let me work." His tone wasn't cruel. It was the voice of someone who'd lost before and refused to do it again. Clara's throat burned, but she nodded. Blake slid off his Harley, boots sinking into the mud. The rain fell harder, drumming against metal, drowning the world in white noise. He signaled the others forward. From their vantage point on the ridge, the black van sat below, idling beside a crumbling concrete wall. A man stood near the open door, shouting into his phone, his movements sharp and frantic. The headlights painted the mud in gold. Blake crouched beside Ryder. "One guard? Maybe two inside," Ryder said, scanning through binoculars. "No kids in sight." Dean tightened his grip on his gun. "So we ask him nicely." Blake's mouth twitched. Always the diplomat. Lightning flashed, and the man by the van turned, looking straight toward them, eyes wide, hand going for his weapon. "Now," Blake hissed. The bikers moved as one. Dean and Ryder surged down the hill, mud flying beneath their boots. The guard barely had time to shout before Dean slammed into him, tackling him into the dirt. The phone flew from his hand, landing face down in the mud. Blake reached him first, pinning him with one boot. "Where are the kids?" The man spat rain and blood. "You're too late." Blake pressed harder. "Say that again." "They're gone," he wheezed. "Boss took them, said he'd handle it himself." Dean leaned down, voice sharp. "Where?" The man coughed, choking on mud. "Old rail yard. 20 minutes north." Ryder grabbed the phone from the mud, wiping it clean just enough to see the last dialed number. Darren Cole. He handed it to Blake. "He's still moving," Ryder said. "Probably thinks the storm's cover, then we outrun it," Blake growled. He turned to Clara, who had run down from the ridge despite his order. Her clothes were soaked, hair plastered to her face. "The kids aren't here," he told her, "but we know where they're headed." She nodded, voice trembling. "Then what are we waiting for?" Dean grinned. "I like her." They left the guard tied to a signpost, headlights sweeping through the rain as they tore back up the hill. The roar of the engines returned, louder now, like the storm itself had chosen a side. Blake radioed ahead. "Ryder, call Sheriff Callan. Tell him to close every road around the rail yard." Ryder's voice came back through static. "You think he'll help? He will if he wants to keep his badge." The trail narrowed, twisting through the dark like a vein through rock. Water ran down in torrents, turning the ground slick. But the bikers didn't slow. They leaned into the turns, lightning flashing across chrome and steel, tires slicing through puddles. Then through the storm's noise came something faint, high-pitched, broken, carried by the wind. Clara froze. "Stop!" she screamed. Dean braked hard, the bike fishtailing before steadying. Blake turned in his seat. "What?" She ripped off her helmet, eyes scanning the trees. "I heard her. Emma, she's crying!" Blake listened. For a moment, all he could hear was rain and thunder. Then it came again, a thin, trembling sound, almost swallowed by the storm. They followed it into the trees, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Behind a cluster of broken logs sat a small figure, soaked and shaking. "Emma!" Clara fell to her knees, pulling her daughter into her arms. The little girl sobbed into her chest. "Where's Noah?" Emma could barely speak. They took him. The man in the red jacket. Dean cursed. "That's Cole's driver." Blake's jaw clenched. "Ryder, get her back to the bikes, now." He turned to Clara. "We're not done yet." She held Emma tighter. "You'll bring him back?" His voice came like a promise carved in steel. "We don't leave family behind." The rain came harder, washing blood and mud into the earth. Engines screamed to life again, echoing through the valley like war drums. The Iron Vow roared north, chasing headlights into the storm. And this time, it wasn't just a rescue. It was revenge. The rain had turned to knives. Each drop hit the ground with a sting, slicing through the air as the Iron Vow roared north. Their headlights cut through the downpour, beams flashing against old signs and rusted fences. Ahead, Blake Mercer's focus never wavered. He could almost hear the ticking clock in his mind, every second another step away from saving Noah Hensley. Ryder's voice broke through the storm. Got the coordinates. The old Ridgehaven rail yard, abandoned 10 years ago. Blake's jaw flexed. And now it's a graveyard if we don't move. Dean Voss's laugh came through the comm, wild and sharp. Then let's wake the dead. The convoy split as they neared the outskirts of town. Ryder took the rear with two of the younger bikers, cutting off the road behind them. Blake and Dean pushed forward, tires spitting water, engines echoing off rusting train cars. The rail yard rose out of the rain like a skeleton, broken cranes, cracked asphalt, and a maze of abandoned boxcars. Somewhere in that darkness a child cried. Blake killed his engine and signaled for silence. The others followed. The storm raged on, but beneath it you could hear the faint hum of another motor, a van idling nearby. Dean whispered, 2 guards by the main track. Red jackets there. Blake's hand went to his sidearm. We do this clean. They fanned out, shadows moving through the mist. The rain softened their steps but couldn't hide their intent. Dean circled left, creeping along a wall of freight containers, while Blake moved straight ahead, eyes locked on the glow of headlights bleeding through the fog. He could see him now, Darren Cole standing beside the van, phone pressed to his ear. Even drenched, he looked smug, his gold watch catching the lightning. I told you, Cole was shouting. She's desperate. By morning she'll crawl back and beg. Blake stepped from the shadows, voice cutting through the storm like a blade. Looks like she found someone else to beg to. Cole turned, startled for half a breath, then smirked. Well, the famous Blake Mercer. Heard you used to be a soldier. Thought you'd know when a war's lost. This one isn't yours to win. Cole gestured toward the van. You came all this way for one kid. That's loyalty. Shame it's misplaced. Blake's gun never moved, his tone calm. Open the door. Cole's grin widened. Or what? You'll shoot me in front of my men? Go ahead. You'll be dead before I hit the ground. Dean's voice came from behind, low and lethal. You sure about that? Cole spun. Dean had his weapon raised, dripping wet, eyes dark with fury. The 2 guards hesitated, hands halfway to their holsters. Blake's voice was soft but final. Don't! The silence between thunderclaps stretched thin. Then a small sound broke it, a muffled sob from inside the van. Blake's chest tightened. That's him! Cole tilted his head, almost amused. You think I won't hurt the boy? Blake stepped forward. You hurt him, and I'll take everything you own, 1 heartbeat at a time. Cole's smirk faltered. The storm was louder now, wind tearing at his coat, rain running down his face like sweat. You think you scare me, Mercer? I own this town, not anymore. From the highway beyond the rail yard, headlights flared. Sirens rose, faint but unmistakable. Ryder's voice cut through the radio. Sheriff Callan's here. Brought company. Cole's head snapped toward the sound. No. Blake seized the moment. Dean, now. Dean moved like lightning. He lunged, kicking the guard's gun aside and slamming him into the van. Blake fired once, a warning shot that shattered a floodlight and plunged the yard into flickering darkness. Cole reached for his gun, but Blake was faster. He pinned him against the van, the muzzle pressed against his chest. Where's the key? Cole's sneer cracked. You wouldn't. Blake's voice dropped to a growl. Try me. A moment passed, then Cole's hand trembled as he tossed the keyring to the ground. Blake scooped it up, yanked open the van door, and there he was, Noah, tied and terrified, his face streaked with tears and grime. It's okay, Blake said, cutting the ropes. You're safe now. The boy threw his arms around him, sobbing into his chest. For the first time, Blake's expression softened. He lifted the child, turning back toward the storm. Behind him, Cole was shouting something. Threats, promises, all drowned by the sirens closing in. Dean called out, "We've got company, let's roll." Blake handed Noah to Ryder, who had just arrived on his bike. "Get him to Clara," Blake ordered. "Go!" Ryder nodded and tore out of the yard, rain and mud exploding beneath his tires. Blake turned back toward Cole. The man had drawn a knife, desperation replacing arrogance. "You think this changes anything?" Cole hissed. "You think you've won?" Blake stared at him, the storm reflected in his eyes. "You ever touch another mother's child again, I won't stop at winning." Cole lunged, blade flashing. Blake sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and drove him into the mud. The knife clattered away. Dean kicked it across the ground. Cole coughed, rain mixing with blood. "You're no better than me." Blake leaned in close. "No, but I'm on their side." The flashing lights grew brighter. Sheriff Callan's SUV skidded into the yard, deputies spilling out. "Drop it!" they shouted. Blake stood, hands up, the rain pouring off him in sheets. "He's yours," he said flatly. Callan's eyes flicked from Blake to Cole. "Mercer, what the hell happened here?" Blake's voice was calm, almost quiet. "Justice, the kind you've been too scared to deliver." The sheriff hesitated, then nodded. "Get him out of here." As the cuffs clicked around Cole's wrists, the Iron Vow regrouped. Dean clapped Blake on the shoulder. "Kid's safe, we did it." Blake looked toward the highway, where the faint glow of Ryder's taillight disappeared into the storm. "Not yet. She needs to see him." They mounted their bikes again. Engines roared, thunder answered. The Iron Vow rode out of the rail yard as the cops dragged Darren Cole away, the storm finally breaking behind them. Somewhere down the road, a mother was waiting. And the sound of the bikes carried one message through the rain. "We don't leave anyone behind." The rain didn't stop that night, but it softened. Less like rage, more like relief. By the time the Iron Vow rode back into Ridgehaven, the world had gone quiet again. The roar of engines faded into the hum of a sleeping town. Clara Hensley stood in front of the dim light of the forge, drenched, her hands shaking around a cup of untouched coffee. Every sound, the creak of the wind, the buzz of a sign, made her heart jump. She didn't care about the storm anymore. She only cared about headlights on the horizon, and then she saw them. The first rumble was distant, swallowed by the rain. Then came another, louder. 6 bikes emerged from the mist, lights glowing through the drizzle. One of them slowed first, Ryder Nash's Harley. On the back seat beneath his jacket was a small figure. Clara ran. She reached them before the engines even stopped. Ryder swung his leg off the bike, helping the child down. Noah's clothes were soaked, his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes were alive. "Mom!" he cried. Clara fell to her knees, pulling him into her arms so hard it looked like she was trying to hold the whole world together. He buried his face against her neck, sobbing into her shoulder. "It's okay," she whispered, over and over, as if saying it could make it true. "You're home now, baby. You're home." The other bikers stood back, letting her have that moment. Dean wiped rain from his face and muttered, "Guess we did all right." Blake dismounted last. He stood there in the rain, helmet under one arm, silent. For the first time that night, his eyes softened. Ryder approached him quietly. Sheriff took Cole. "Looks like Callan finally found a spine." Blake nodded once. "About time." Dean kicked at the wet gravel. "You think it sticks? A guy like Cole, he's got money buried deep." Blake's gaze stayed on Clara, still kneeling in the mud with her son. "Doesn't matter," he said. "He's done here." The rain eased to a mist. The storm was leaving Ridgehaven, but something about it had changed the town forever. Inside the forge, Clara wrapped Noah in a blanket while Emma slept curled up on the couch. The warmth from the old heater buzzed faintly against the silence. When Blake walked in, she looked up, eyes red but steady. "You found him," she said. Blake shrugged, a quiet smile at the corner of his mouth. "He found us." Clara exhaled shakily. "I don't know how to thank you. Don't." He leaned against the doorframe. "Just breathe. That's enough." Noah looked up from her arms. "Mom, is he a superhero?" Clara smiled weakly. "Something like that." Dean laughed. "Kid's not wrong." Blake shot him a look, but Dean only raised his hands. "What? Man saves a family in the rain, stares down a loan shark, walks away like he doesn't care. Pretty sure that qualifies." Ryder poured coffee into 2 mugs and slid one to Blake. "You'll need it. Callan's coming." "Let him," Blake said, sipping. Moments later, the door creaked open. Sheriff Callan stood there, rain still dripping off his hat, eyes shadowed by exhaustion and guilt. "Mercer, Sheriff." Callan looked around, the children asleep, Clara clutching a mug, the bikers watching him with quiet hostility. "Cole's in custody," he said finally. "Feds will take it from here." "Good," Blake said flatly. The sheriff hesitated. "You went too far tonight." Blake met his gaze. "You mean we did your job?" Callan's jaw tightened. "You don't get to decide justice." Blake set down his mug with a soft clink. "No, Sheriff. We just remind people what it looks like." The silence between them was long and heavy. Finally, Callan sighed. "You could have been arrested, you know." "Could have been," Blake said. "But you didn't." Callan looked down, shame flickering in his expression. "You did something tonight I couldn't. Maybe that counts for something." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Words getting out. "You might have just turned this town on its head." "Maybe it needed turning," Blake said. After he left, the room stayed quiet for a while. The only sound was the hum of the heater and the soft rain tapping on the roof. Ryder sat down, rubbing his hands together. "You think he means it?" "Change?" Blake gave a faint shrug. "Doesn't matter. We didn't do it for him." Dean chuckled. "No, we did it because you can't stand debt collectors." Blake smirked. "Something like that." He looked back toward Clara, who had finally fallen asleep on the couch, with both kids tucked against her. For the first time since she'd run into the forge, her face was calm. Blake stood there for a long moment, the storm fading outside, dawn barely starting to show at the horizon. Ryder broke the silence. "You ever think about what comes next?" Blake tilted his head. "You mean after saving the world one desperate mom at a time?" Ryder smiled faintly. "Yeah, something like that." Blake's eyes stayed on the sleeping family. "We keep the engines warm," he said softly. "Someone else will need the ride." The others nodded, quiet agreement hanging in the air. The storm was gone now, replaced by a faint light spilling across the windows. Outside, water still dripped from the roof, collecting in puddles that reflected the first hints of sunrise. The sign above the clubhouse, the forge, flickered once, then glowed steady again. Inside, Clara dreamed of sunlight instead of fear. Her children breathed in rhythm beside her, safe for the first time in months. And the men who had brought them home stood watch in silence as the town of Ridgehaven, for the first time in years, slept in peace. By morning, the storm had left Ridgehaven washed clean, or at least that's how it looked on the surface. The streets shimmered with puddles, sunlight bouncing off them like glass. But peace never stayed long in this town. The news hit before breakfast. Dean Voss burst through the forge's door with a folded newspaper dripping in his hand. "You seen this?" he growled, tossing it onto the table. The headline stretched across the front page in bold black letters. "Local motorcycle gang kidnaps loan officer. Claim justice." Ryder swore under his breath. "They flipped it. They're painting us as the villains." Blake Mercer didn't look up right away. He stood by the window watching the reflection of sunlight in the puddles outside. Who wrote it? Same reporter who used to print Cole's charity ads, Dean said. Guess loyalty doesn't die easy. Blake turned slowly, eyes unreadable. Cole's pulling strings from a cell. Clara, who was sitting on the couch with Noah and Emma eating toast, looked up in alarm. He's in jail. How could he? Ryder cut her off gently. People like him don't stay behind bars, Clara. Not really. Money's longer than fences. Blake walked over, snatching the paper and scanning it. His jaw tightened at the words, vigilante violence. The story was full of lies. Claims that the Iron Vow had attacked Cole unprovoked, that the children were found unharmed after a misunderstanding, and that the bikers had assaulted law enforcement. Dean's fists clenched. They're trying to bury what really happened. They're not burying it, Blake said quietly. They're rewriting it. Ryder leaned against the wall, arms folded. So what's the move? Go silent or fight it? Blake didn't answer right away. His eyes drifted toward Clara and the kids. Emma was coloring on the edge of a napkin, unaware of the tension. Noah was making motorcycle noises with his spoon. Clara caught Blake's stare. If they make people believe you're the bad guys, won't the law come after you? He shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time. The room fell silent. Rainwater dripped from the roof outside, rhythmic, steady. Then Blake said, "We don't fight on paper. Not yet." Dean frowned. So we just let them trash our name? Blake looked at him. For now. We protect the family first. Clara blinked. Family? Blake nodded toward her and the kids. They'll come for what they couldn't break. That night, Ridgehaven wasn't quiet. Anonymous calls flooded the forge. Threats, slurs, the same coward's courage that hides behind a phone line. Someone spray-painted thugs across the gate. Dean wanted blood. Let me find out who did it. 10 minutes, No, Blake said. We're not giving them a war. Ryder added, You know Cole's counting on that, right? He wants us loud. He wants chaos so he looks like a victim. Blake exhaled. Then we stay quiet until they hear the truth. But Ridgehaven wasn't a town that waited for truth. By noon the next day, 2 police cruisers rolled up outside the forge. Sheriff Callan stepped out, hat pulled low. Behind him, the same reporter from the newspaper, a man in a grey suit, holding a camera like it was a weapon. Blake stepped outside, wiping grease from his hands. Morning, Sheriff. Wish it were, Callan muttered. They want a statement. The reporter pushed forward. Mr. Mercer, is it true the Iron Vow assaulted Darren Cole before his arrest? Blake's gaze was cold. We rescued 2 kids. That's the truth. Yet you refused to cooperate with law enforcement during that incident. I didn't see much law to cooperate with, Blake said flatly. The reporter smiled. A predator smelling blood. So you admit acting outside the law? Dean's voice cut through from the doorway. You want quotes or bruises, pal? Pick one. Callan shot him a warning look. Enough. Everyone cool it. The reporter stepped back, but the smirk stayed. People will hear your side, he said, voice dripping with false kindness. One way or another. When they left, Dean slammed the door. One way or another. That sound like a threat to you? Blake sat down, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Let them talk. The louder they shout, the sooner the town gets tired of listening. But the town didn't get tired. It divided. Some neighbors crossed the street when they saw Clara. Parents whispered at the school about the woman who ran with bikers. The diner that used to serve the forge stopped taking their orders. Yet there were others, people who remembered the night the Angels of Steel rode through the rain. The mechanic who owed Blake a favor, the shop owner whose son was in trouble once. They came quietly, leaving food, gas, or notes at the gate. Thank you for what you did. Ryder noticed first. For every person shouting, there's 2 who know the truth. We just can't see them yet. Blake nodded slowly. Then we make them see. He opened his phone, scrolling through contacts. There's a reporter upstate. Nora Lane. She doesn't write for money. She writes for blood. Dean raised an eyebrow. You sure that's smart? Blake smiled faintly. It's time someone told the real story. That evening, Clara found him outside under the half-lit sign. The rain had started again, light this time, more memory than storm. She handed him a thermos of coffee. "You really think talking will change anything?" He took it, sipped once, then said quietly, "Talking didn't. Doing did." She nodded, watching the reflection of the bikes in the puddles. "You could leave, you know, just ride out and never look back." Blake's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Maybe. But if I leave, they win. And if we stay quiet too long, the truth dies." Clara looked at him, her voice soft. "You've already done enough." Blake shook his head. "Not until this town learns that mercy doesn't wear a suit." Behind them, lightning flickered far away, silent and distant. The Iron Vow stood at the edge of another fight, not one of bullets or fists this time, but of stories and scars. And as the rain whispered across the roof, Blake made the quietest vow of all. If the truth was going to drown, he'd teach it how to swim. The next few days felt like a siege, not with guns or fists, but with words. The paper headlines grew meaner, louder. Talk radio called them leathered thugs. City council meetings mentioned safety concerns, but underneath that noise, something else was building. Quiet, patient, dangerous. Blake Mercer knew that sound. It was the sound right before a storm turns. At dawn, he sat on the steps of the forge, coffee steaming in one hand, the other scrolling through his phone. Messages blinked one after another, all from a single contact, Nora Lane. "Got the files. I'm running the story tonight. Brace for noise." He smiled faintly. "That's my kind of reporter." Ryder stepped out, yawning, pulling on his jacket. "You're up early. Didn't sleep? Too much coffee? Too much truth about to hit daylight." Dean wandered out next, helmet under his arm. "You tell her everything that mattered," Blake said. "What happened, who paid for silence, who the law looked away from. She'll do the rest." Dean whistled. "You think she'll print it?" "She already did." By noon, every diner and gas station TV in Ridgehaven was tuned to the same broadcast. Nora Lane's voice filled the airwaves. For years, local businessman Darren Cole has operated a private loan network linked to extortion, bribery, and kidnapping. New evidence shows cooperation from several members of Ridgehaven's own police department. His arrest last week, originally reported as a vigilante attack, is now confirmed as an illegal debt collection attempt gone wrong. One that would have ended in tragedy if not for the actions of the Iron Vow Motorcycle Club. Blake didn't have to watch to know what she said next. He could feel the shift ripple through town, the diner patrons going quiet, the store owners pausing mid-sentence, the kids whispering at the schoolyard fence. By the time the report ended, Ridgehaven wasn't silent because of shame. It was silent because of realization. Clara was the first to reach him, phone in hand, her face pale. "It's everywhere," she breathed. "The truth. You did it." Blake shook his head. "No, we just stopped them from burying it." Ryder grinned. "You hear that? She used our names on national news." Dean smirked. "Guess we're famous." Blake gave him a look. "Fame gets you shot, then I'll sign autographs in Kevlar." They laughed, but under it was tension, the kind that comes after you win a round and realize the fight isn't over. That night, Ridgehaven changed again. People began showing up at the forge, not with pitchforks or cameras, but with quiet gratitude. The mechanic who once avoided eye contact left an envelope under the gate that said for the kids. The cafe owner sent food. A school teacher dropped off clothes for Emma and Noah. Clara stood watching through the window, tears catching the light. "They're not afraid anymore." Blake sipped his coffee. "They were never afraid of us. They were afraid of what believing in us would cost." "Do you think it's over?" He shook his head. "Truth never ends things. It just changes who bleeds." He was right. 2 days later, the phone in his office rang. Ryder picked it up, and whatever he heard drained the color from his face. "It's Cole," he said quietly. "He's out." Clara froze. "What do you mean, out?" Dean slammed his fist into the wall. "How the hell?" "Bail," Ryder interrupted. "Someone posted it. Private bond. They moved him to a halfway house until the trial." Blake's voice was calm, but it cut through the noise. "Where?" "Edge of town, near the old grain silos." Dean's fists tightened. "You want me to handle it?" "No," Blake said. "We don't touch him. Not unless he moves first." Clara's voice broke. "He'll come after me. After them." Blake looked at her, and for the first time his calm cracked just a little. "He tries, he won't make it to the gate." That night, the Iron Vow set a watch. Bikes parked at the entrance, lights dimmed, engines off. The sound of rain returned, softer this time, but enough to drown footsteps. Blake stayed awake long after the others slept. The glow from a single lamp painting half his face in gold and half in shadow. On the table beside him sat a folded piece of paper, Nora's follow-up report. In the heart of a small town, justice didn't come from a courtroom. It came on 2 wheels under the rain. He traced the words with his finger, thoughtful. Maybe the world finally understood. Or maybe it just wanted a story with heroes this week. Dean came in around midnight, hair dripping. North side's clear, no movement. Blake nodded. "He's smart. He won't come at us straight." Dean sat across from him. "You really think he'll try again? Man's reputation's ashes." Blake's eyes stayed on the rain outside. Ashes still burn if the wind's right. Dean leaned back, arms crossed. "You ever get tired of this? Fighting ghosts, saving strangers?" Blake gave a faint smile. "You ever get tired of breathing?" Dean chuckled softly. "Fair." They sat in silence for a while, the steady hum of rain filling the spaces between words. Out in the dark, a car engine started somewhere near the silos. Blake's eyes flicked toward the sound, instinct sharp as a blade. He stood. Ryder appeared at the doorway, breathless. "He's moving!" Blake grabbed his jacket, voice steady. "Then so are we." Clara stepped into the hall, pale but determined. "If this ends tonight, I want to see it end." Blake shook his head. "No, you stay here." She met his gaze. "They're my children. He came for them. I have a right to see him stopped." For a moment, Blake didn't answer. Then he nodded once, slow and deliberate. "All right, but you don't move until I say—" The storm outside began to build again. Not the wild kind from before, but the slow, coiling kind that knows where to strike. The Iron Vow rolled their bikes into formation. Engines started one by one, growling low under the rain. The sound filled the night, a chorus of steel and thunder. As the convoy pulled out, lightning flashed across Ridgehaven's horizon, a single split of light cutting the dark in 2. The war of stories was over. Now came the reckoning. Lightning split the sky over Ridgehaven like a scar that refused to heal. The rain had returned, relentless this time, the kind of downpour that drowns sound, sight, and sense. But the Iron Vow's engine still cut through it like thunder that belonged to no god. Blake Mercer rode at the front, jaw set, eyes locked on the dark road ahead. Behind him, Dean Voss and Ryder Nash followed close, the headlight beams slicing through the sheets of rain. They weren't chasing now, they were hunting. Sheriff Callan's voice had come over the radio 20 minutes earlier. "Cole's out. 2 cars left the silos headed north. One's his." Blake didn't ask how Callan knew. It didn't matter. Dean leaned forward on his bike, shouting over the wind. "You think he's dumb enough to run?" Blake's voice came back steady, cold. "He's not running. He's trying to end it." Up ahead, twin red taillights flickered through the storm. The black sedan fishtailed on the slick road, engine roaring. Blake's hand went up, a silent signal. Dean and Ryder flanked out, cutting through the puddles like blades. The convoy moved in perfect sync, the way they always did when words became useless. The chase snaked along the edge of the ridge, rain hammering the asphalt. The sedan jerked left suddenly, tires screaming. It veered off into an old service road, gravel spraying behind it. Ryder grinned through his helmet. Cornered rat. They followed the vanishing lights into a half-collapsed industrial yard. Steel beams, dead cranes, rain pooling in black pits. The sedan skidded to a halt in the middle of it, headlights glaring like eyes full of panic. When Blake and his men surrounded the car, the driver's door swung open. Darren Cole stumbled out, soaked and wild-eyed, one hand clutching a pistol. The rain turned his white shirt transparent, the gold watch on his wrist flashing with every lightning strike. He was shaking, but his voice still carried arrogance. "You think this ends with me in cuffs again, Mercer?" Blake stepped off his Harley, slow, calm, boots splashing in the puddles. "No, it ends when you stop breathing or stop running. You pick." Cole aimed the gun at him, his hand trembling. "You think you're some kind of savior? You're just another criminal who got lucky," Dean called from behind his bike, his grin audible. "Funny, coming from a guy who kidnaps kids for interest." Cole's rage cracked. "You ruined me! You took everything!" Blake's tone stayed level. "No, you built yourself on bones and called it business. I just kicked the foundation." Cole screamed, firing. The shot tore through the rain, echoing across the yard, but Blake was already moving. The bullet shattered a steel beam behind him, sparks flying. He ducked, rolled through the puddle, and came up hard, slamming into Cole's chest. The gun went off again, this time into the mud. They hit the ground together. Blake's fist came down once, then again. Cole swung wildly, but he wasn't a fighter. He was a man who paid others to bleed. Blake grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the car door. "This is what power feels like," Blake said through gritted teeth. "Heavy, dirty. You can't launder it, you can't buy it, and you sure as hell can't fake it." Cole spat blood into the rain. "You don't scare me." Blake stared at him, eyes dark and steady. "I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to end the noise." Cole's hand darted to his ankle, a second gun, but before he could raise it, a single shot cracked through the air. Cole froze, eyes wide. The weapon dropped from his hand and landed in the water. Dean lowered his pistol, smoke rising from the barrel. "You said no heroes, boss. Doesn't mean no backup." Blake exhaled, stepping back. Cole collapsed to his knees, clutching his side, the rain washing the blood down his arm. Ryder walked forward, kicking the gun away. "Sheriff's on his way. Might want to practice your mugshot." Cole's laughter came out broken, half cough, half sob. "You think people will remember you for this? They'll forget. They always do." Blake crouched down, meeting his eyes. "Maybe, but she won't. And that's enough." Headlights cut through the storm again. Sheriff Callan's SUV barreling into the yard, tires sliding to a stop. Officers spilled out, weapons raised. Blake lifted his hands, voice calm. "He's all yours, Sheriff." Callan looked between them, Cole bleeding, the bikers standing motionless in the rain. "Mercer," he said quietly, "you keep cleaning up this town. There won't be any dirt left." Blake's reply was barely audible. "Then maybe it'll finally breathe." As the officers cuffed Cole, the rain began to fade. The thunder rolled away into the distance, leaving only the hiss of water against steel. Blake turned to his crew. "We're done here." Dean holstered his gun. "You mean for tonight, or for good?" Blake said. They mounted their bikes, engines rumbling low as the police lights flickered red and blue across their jackets. When they pulled out of the yard, dawn was just starting to break, a faint grey glow seeping through the clouds. Clara was waiting for them back at the forge, standing under the awning with her children pressed close. The moment Blake rolled in, her hand flew to her mouth. "It's over?" He nodded. "He won't hurt anyone again." Her eyes filled, a quiet sob escaping before she could stop it. "Thank you." Blake shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just keep living." Dean leaned out from his bike, grinning. "Told you we'd handle it." Emma peeked from behind her mother, smiling shyly. "You're the Thundermen." Blake's lips curved just slightly. "Yes, that's one way to put it." As the others laughed softly, the first rays of sunrise broke through the clouds, painting the wet pavement in gold. The storm was gone. Ridgehaven was quiet again. But for Blake Mercer, the sound of the engines wasn't noise anymore. It was a promise, one carved in steel, sealed by rain, and kept by men who never ran from darkness. A year later, Ridgehaven no longer smelled like rain and gasoline. The storms still came, but they didn't bring fear anymore. Only the kind of thunder that reminded people they were still alive. The town had changed in quiet ways that mattered. The sign at the entrance that once read The Forge now hung beside another, hand-painted, slightly crooked, Hensley's Diner. Inside, sunlight spilled through clean windows. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. Clara Hensley moved between tables with a tired but peaceful smile. Her kids, Emma and Noah, were coloring on the counter, arguing softly over who got the blue crayon. It was the kind of normal she'd once thought she'd never feel again. A framed newspaper clipping hung near the door. Iron Vow MC saves 2 local children, exposes crime syndicate. Next to it was a small silver emblem, twin wings etched into metal, the same one Blake Mercer had left behind. Clara caught herself glancing at it sometimes when the morning light hit just right, like it could still hum with the echo of engines. Lena, the diner's cook, poked her head out from the kitchen window. "You dreaming again, boss lady?" Clara smiled faintly. "Just remembering." "You've been remembering for 12 months straight," Lena teased. "Maybe it's time to stop looking at the road and start living on it." Clara laughed. "I'm living plenty." But her eyes flicked to the window again, where sunlight bounced off the stretch of highway beyond the diner. The same road where she'd once run barefoot in the rain, screaming for help. The bell above the door jingled. Every sound in the room seemed to hush for a heartbeat. Then through the doorway came a tall man in a dark leather jacket, sun at his back, a helmet tucked under one arm. His hair was longer, his beard heavier, but the eyes were unmistakable. "Morning," Blake said. Clara froze for a second before she found her voice. "You actually came back. Promised I would," he said, glancing around the diner. "Looks good, smells better." Noah's face lit up. "Mom, it's the Thunderman," Blake chuckled. "That's one I haven't heard in a while." Emma jumped off the stool and ran over, wrapping her arms around his leg. "You missed my birthday." He looked down, mock serious. "Did I? That's on me. I'll have to fix that." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small metal trinket, a pendant shaped like the Iron Vow's wings, smaller now, polished and worn smooth. "Here, for both of you, so you don't forget to be brave." The kids gasped, clutching them like treasures. Clara's eyes softened. "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged. "Couldn't show up empty-handed." Lena appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "You want coffee or the usual hero's welcome?" "Coffee's fine," Blake said, sliding into a booth. Clara poured it herself and set it in front of him. "So, where'd the road take you?" "Everywhere and nowhere," he said, stirring his cup absently. "Been helping some folks down south, people like you who ran out of doors to knock on." Clara smiled. "Still saving strangers." Blake looked at her, voice softer now. "Still keeping your promise." For a moment, silence sat between them, the comfortable kind. Outside, the sound of engines approached. 2 Harleys rolled into the parking lot. Dean and Ryder, helmets off, grinning like they'd never missed a beat. Dean called through the door. "Told you he couldn't resist the pancakes." Ryder waved to Clara. "Dinah looks great. You hiring?" She laughed. "You couldn't survive one shift." The bikers sat at the counter, the old rhythm between them falling back into place as naturally as breathing. Emma showed them her drawings. Noah told the story of how he beat a school bully, just like Mr. Dean would have done, which made everyone laugh, even Blake. For the first time in a long time, the place felt like what Ridgehaven had always needed to be. Not quiet, not perfect, but alive. When the breakfast rush died down, Blake stood to leave. Clara walked him outside, wiping her hands on a towel. "You're not staying?" she asked. He looked out over the highway. "You know me, I don't do still very well." She smiled, though her eyes said she wished he would. "Where to?" "East," he said. "A town called Marlow. They've got trouble that looks familiar." Clara nodded. "Then they're lucky." Blake turned to face her fully. The sunlight caught the faint scar along his jaw, the one she'd noticed that first night in the rain. "You did good here," he said quietly. "You made peace stick." "Maybe," she said, "but I didn't do it alone." He smiled, the kind that carried more gratitude than words ever could. "You don't owe me thanks, Clara." "I'm not thanking you," she said softly. "I'm saying goodbye." For a heartbeat they stood there, caught in the pull of memory, the storm, the rescue, the road that had tied them together. Then Blake nodded once. "Goodbye, then." She stepped back as he swung onto his bike. The others revved their engines, the sound rising like a heartbeat beneath the sky. Emma and Noah ran out, waving. "Bye, Thundermen!" Dean shouted back. "Stay out of trouble!" Blake revved his engine once, looked back at Clara and said, "If you ever hear thunder rolling through Ridgehaven again, don't be afraid. It just means someone's coming home." Then the Iron Vow rode out into the sunlight, the roar of their engines fading down the highway until all that was left was the hum of wind through the fields. Clara stood there long after they'd gone, her children pressed against her sides. The horizon shimmered with heat, the air heavy with the smell of oil and dust. She looked down at the small silver wings gleaming in her hand. "They're not thunder," she whispered. "They're mercy in motion." Behind her, the diner sign flickered once, catching the sunlight. The town of Ridgehaven carried on, quieter now but stronger, stitched together by the sound of storms and second chances. Because some promises don't fade, they ride forever. She ran through the rain, begging strangers to save her children, and found a family built on steel and loyalty instead. Clara Hensley thought mercy was weakness until she saw it ride through a storm wearing leather and thunder. The Iron Vow didn't just rescue her kids. They reminded an entire town what courage looks like when no one else will stand. Now Ridgehaven breathes easier because kindness roared louder than fear. This is Heart Tales, where compassion meets chaos and ordinary people become legends when they refuse to walk away. If this story moved you, hit subscribe, drop a comment below and tell us, would you have stopped for someone like Clara that night? Stay tuned, because every week another storm rides through, and every time mercy rides with it.